Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I see Mr. 10%, the big guy, President Biden, in France this morning,
And
commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
And what was your comment
off
air? What you said?
Well, what I understand, he talked about threats to democracy, like Donald Trump, Russia, Ukraine, and then he also told the assembled that his uncle Bozy would have been in attendance today, but he was eaten by cannibals. So.
Well played, my man. Now you got to tweet that out.
All right. On Tuesday, as we brought to you yesterday, talked a bit about Merrick Garland was before the House committee. Matt Gaetz was one of the interrogators, and he said, you're saying that you didn't coordinate with Alvin Bragg in Manhattan or Fani Willis and Nathan Wade in Fulton County, and you're saying people who say that the Department of Justice was coordinating these Trump prosecutions are just engaged in conspiracy theories. So, there's an easy way for you to prove that we're just a bunch of conspiracy theories, people raising questions about your integrity as an attorney general. This was that exchange.
General, you've told us that it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump. You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
You make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what, if anything, you and Matt Colangelo talked about before he left to go join the Alvin Bragg prosecution team in New York? You're number 3 guy at DOJ. You knew about that, right?
I mean, he is your number 3 guy, and they are friends.
Things
why would
like
you leave D.C. to go to New York?
Things like that we'd like to know about. If there's no there, then just prove up the lack of a there. Shouldn't be that difficult. Wonder why it is. Matt Wolfson is an investigative journalist. He writes at oppo-research.com, and he's written a piece for the American Conservative that lays out some of the connections, some of which have been disclosed before, but others which have not gotten very much publicity, and it's worth discussing. We sort of, I feel like we're the investigative agency here, and we need like one of those mob crime family flowcharts to map all these people out. Yeah. Matt Wolfson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy.
Well, why don't we start with Matt Colangelo, since he's was an upper echelon guy at DOJ, and then he was standing behind Alvin Bragg when he was celebrating his prosecution team's wonderful job and dedicated public service in the recently concluded trial.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most interesting things that hadn't been much mentioned about Colangelo is that at the time he's doing this, his wife, who came up through the same sort of things he did, the NAACP, which is Soros-funded, the Obama Legal Counsel's office, is now at Harvard as well, of course. These are all Harvard-minted people, the real operators behind this, in my view, or the people sort of running a loose, informal play behind the scenes. But Ann Small, Colangelo's wife, is working in New York for a major Democratic hedge fund donor, a mega donor, James Simons. So right there already you have, I've mentioned 3 things, obvious reasons why all of these people, even without a smoking gun, which, as I wrote in the piece, often doesn't exist in Washington, because these people can sort of hint to each other what to do. They don't even have to put it down on paper.
Right.
But a logical mind can see pretty obvious motives just in what I've laid out in 10 seconds, for Colangelo to want to take out Trump, do the work of the Democratic Party. It'll help him. It'll help his wife. His wife also serves on the NAACP Legal Defense Fund board alongside Jonathan Soros of that family. The connections, when you sort of look in, even cursory, are never ending.
But who talked him into taking that case?
Who talked Colangelo into taking this case?
Yeah.
I mean, he has a history. He was at the New York Attorney General's office under Letitia James 5 years ago investigating Trump. And before that, he was at the Department of Justice. So he's done this leap before. He was at the DOJ during the Obama administration. Then he went to the New York Attorney General's office to investigate Trump's business dealings during Trump's administration. Then he went back to the DOJ. And now he's back in New York at the New York DA's office. So my view is there didn't have to be much talking involved. I think they know that he's someone who's, generally willing. And I don't even know if they see this as conspiratorial. I think they think, well, we need a guy to, handle something, and he's a good fixer.
Exactly. Right. He's the hired gun, and he has every incentive to do this because if you're the guy they send to make sure this goes right in New York, and it goes right in New York, then there are benefits that accrue to you and your wife, who, by the way, as you mentioned in your piece, they go back a ways. During the Obama administration, his wife, Ann Small, was working for the SEC, and that was obviously a springboard for her to then go work for that billionaire hedge fund dude who's a Democrat Party.
Well, she also at the time overlapped with Ed Siskel, who's a Chicago guy with Obama and Rahm Emanuel connections, who's currently serving as White House counsel. And according to Nathan Wade, the counsel's office had 2 meetings with him.
Right.
So the connections really are, Colangelo via his wife is connected with Siskel. The connections are, many parts.
Well, right. So the Colangelo through his wife is connected with Siskel, who had meetings with Nathan Wade. So Colangelo and wife, Colangelo to the Chicago lawyer who's a part of Obama world, to the Fulton County prosecutor. I mean, those are sort of the questions I think Matt Gaetz was getting at in terms of, I just disclose conversations and explain to everyone who these people are and what, if any, interactions you had with them and the leadership at the Department of Justice and then so on and so forth. As you say, I get it. We get this in Chicago. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. You don't need to be told explicitly, but still, I mean, there is at some point, somebody is saying something to say, you're going to play this role, or you got to talk to this guy. And then you see these linkages start to materialize. It's a pretty strong circumstantial case just there. And we haven't even gotten to the other bolt-ons like Norm Eisen and Jack Smith's wife and so forth. So why don't we? Tell us about Jack Smith and his wife.
Well, Smith, went to a state school, which in this world, I existed. I'm a ex-leftist, ex-liberal, and so I existed at a sort of removed from this for a while. I knew some people who had trajectories like this, who, clerked for the Second Circuit. And Smith, when I sort of looked at his biography, he went to SUNY. He went to a state school, so it's, it's looked down on a little bit. It's a little lower in this world.
Yeah.
He's not obviously minted for undergrad. He goes to Harvard Law, and he marries into liberal and legal royalty because his wife, who's a documentarian, Katie Shavigny, who produced the Michelle Obama documentary Becoming on Netflix, her father, Paul Shavigny, was a very eminent, he's passed on now, but he was an eminent liberal legal professor at NYU Law, which is 4th or 5th in the country ranked, whatever that may or may not mean. He's connected to both the Open Society Foundations of Soros and the Brennan Center for Justice, which is the same center, the left-wing legal advocacy group that's very well respected in those circles, that's funding Judge Merchan's daughter. So, again, right there, 10 seconds. a bunch of interests at play.
Right, 10 seconds, and you just have to, put a couple of names together, and you get right to the principles, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way of describing it. Yeah.
And also, I mean, just the other sort of influencers that are the go-to official, legal experts for the D.C. press corps, for the papers of the propaganda outlets of record, I should say. One of them is Norm Eisen, for example, and these are the people that go on, do not disclose their relationships, their connections, and bless what Alvin Bragg is doing in D.C., in Manhattan, and what Fani Willis is doing in Fulton County, and what Jack Smith is doing in D.C., right?
Yeah, and Eisen served served at the White House around the time that Siskel, currently the counsel, served in the White House. And Eisen was quoted in January in the Times running cover for the White House counsel's office and Nathan Wade, saying that, all of these connections are perfectly normal in the process of doing business. Now, that may or may not be the case, but the New York Times didn't mention that he worked with Siskel at around the same time during the Obama administration. It also didn't mention that literally as we speak, and for the last 2 years, Eisen has been convening meetings with major sort of Washington influencers, I guess, Bill Kristol, George Conway, Jeffrey Toobin, a kind of familiar set of characters with long links to the Capitol, weekly meetings where they're talking sometimes to government officials, strategizing about how to use these cases to put Trump away. I mean, the Times didn't disclose this. It wasn't formally disclosed until a month or two ago in Politico, but this was known throughout Washington and New York in media circles for the last 2 years. So, I mean, this is a major thing for the Times not to disclose. There's no justification for that.
I hope those meetings were in person, because you know what Jeffrey Toobin does when he's on a Zoom meeting. You got to keep. Yeah. Matt Wolfson, investigative journalist. He writes at oppo-research.com. Check out his piece at the American Mind. Here are the connections between the people behind Trump's prosecutions. We've just scratched the surface here. Very good stuff, though. Matt Wolfson, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Our communities deserve to have their tax dollars spent efficiently. All over Chicagoland, there is an increased need for vital projects like wetland improvements, enhancing water quality, or stormwater mitigation to protect homes against devastation.